Cape. So please join me in welcoming Senator Sear.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you to the entire staff of the Cape Cod Commission for making this happen. I was with Secretary Howe in Hyannis earlier today, who said she was here. Lieutenant Governor's on her way. We're really drawing a whole host of folks here talking about the challenges, the opportunities and the challenges that we face here on Cape Cod. And one of the things that sort of heartens me most, right, is that of the people in this room, right, folks who are in the business of running things, employing folks, making decisions at the municipal and county level, we really benefit by sort of pulling in the same direction, as my good friend and colleague Sarah Peak is fond of saying, right? Pulling at the same oar. And to feel that energy here in this room and to see so many people who have been partners to me and our entire legislative delegation and to the commission, and kudos to the commission for pulling this all together. So, you know, everyone knows this, right? But to state the obvious around the crisis we face around housing. I've been state senator for 8 years. I was the new guy, I'm still kind of the young guy. But in those 8 years, we have had a problem that existed since I was in high school, and a problem that has really been put on steroids. So 8 years ago, when I was elected to the state senate, median home price in Cape Cod was about $350,000 a year. Something that was in reach of, you know, was still pretty difficult, but in reach for working folks. And now it's nearly $900,000 for a median home price. And that is looking Cape-wide, right? So it's not looking at the extremities of the region. It's not looking at the most expensive parcels. You know, in those 8 years, it's 150% increase. For those of you who are lucky to own, God bless, you're sitting on probably one of the most valuable investments in the United States, better than Wall Street, better than Wall Street you can have. But this has really been catastrophic for our workforce, for our sense of place, for our year-round community. And I can tell you, this gets worse because I also represent Martha's Vineyard. I also represent Nantucket. I grew up in Truro, I live in Provincetown, right? The parts of the region that are struggling in this most. And for those of us here in Harwich or in Sandwich, this problem is only going to be exacerbated. And so we have really made this as a region our key priority. You know, we know we have about 1,000 families leaving Cape Cod a year, earning under $100,000 because they can't afford housing. About 30% of our workforce is coming over those bridges. A big shout out and kudos to Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, congressional delegation, us for getting Bridge 1 funding replaced, right? But even with 2 gleaming new bridges, right? In a region that is quite literally a peninsula, that is not a sustainable workforce strategy, right? In a community, in a region where median age is 55, right? This is not a sustainable strategy. So we have been focusing on this issue, right? And it's we have a real supply and demand problem, right? This place has only become more precious, more valuable. People are wanting to be here, and we have frankly not kept up with housing. And the housing that we've built has really been geared towards single-family homes for second, third, fourth homes, investment properties. So what are we doing about it? Because that's what I'm here to talk about today. So first, we as a delegation focus on wastewater, because without wastewater infrastructure, you cannot build the dense year-round housing that our communities need to make a life. Christy mentioned the Cape Cod Lions Water Protection Fund, written and authored by Sarah Peak and myself in 2018. This offers a 25% subsidy to all of our towns and their wastewater projects. To date, $204 million in other people's money funding wastewater projects in 8 towns. This has been a game changer. And there's more to come as this fund is operating, right? But I want to be really clear that you can't solve housing without wastewater infrastructure, and we've done that. Sarah Peak deserves a huge round of applause for a number of reasons, but particularly for leadership and partnership. And I was involved in 2018, the things that we like, what we got done, I would argue is the biggest thing that I'll have gotten done in my tenure, however long I've served in this position, with an asterisk about what I'm going to talk about now. And that's in the Affordable Homes Act. So Governor Healy signed the Affordable Homes Act into law in August. This is a historic $5.16 billion spending authorization to invest in housing across the Commonwealth. It also includes 50 unique policy initiatives to address rising housing costs, due to very high demand we have and limited supply, right? We may be in the worst situation, the worst part of the housing crisis here on the Cape and Islands, but this is a problem across the Commonwealth. So this is unprecedented authorizations that is going to allow us to modernize our state's public housing system, to boost programs that support first-time home buyers and home ownership, and resources allocated to build more housing. And statewide policy changes include accessory dwelling units by right, which we've been leading the way on here on Cape Cod in some towns, supporting the conversion of vacant commercial space to housing, supporting redevelopment, and most importantly, something called the Seasonal Communities Delegation. And once again, I want to recognize Senator Moran, I see Representative Flanagan, Representative Peake, all the members of this Cape and Islands Legislative Delegation who once again spoke in unison, working to make the case on Beacon Hill that the needs of Cape Codders and Islanders when it comes to housing are truly unique. And we were able to preserve this seasonal communities designation included in the Affordable Homes Act. And this is a big deal. So I'm going to tell you about sort of what this is, because I want to make sure that the leaders in the room understand what seasonal communities designation is, what this is going to unlock, and how do we really seize in the moment and move forward. So, in this includes a seasonal communities designation. There's also an authorization that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities will establish an Office of Livable Communities and Community Services. So this is a new office within HLC to offer technical support with an emphasis on rural towns and seasonal communities as they implement housing-specific solutions, right? So we see this problem time and again, right? Truro and Wellfleet have tried to bring on a housing coordinator, right? To help us do this work. HLC is now going to have someone at the other end of the phone. They're going to pick up the, if you're in Truro, if you're in Shellmark, if you're in any seasonal community, you'll be able to get technical assistance from the state in how to figure out housing. Also established in this new law is a Seasonal Communities Advisory Council. So the council is to provide advice and recommendations to the secretary on programs and services related to seasonal communities designation. Seasonal communities. How many folks have heard of a gateway cities designation, or gateway cities, right? So gateway cities is sort of focused on some of the most economically disadvantaged mid and large size, or mid-size, they're all mid-sized cities in Massachusetts. Barnstable is a gateway city. And a gateway city designation unlocks sort of a whole host of opportunities that those cities can tap into. So seasonal communities is sort of a similar idea, right? That seasonal communities, right, communities that have this population flux, that have a housing market where you have a disproportionate number of second and third homes, are again able to unlock and enter into this toolkit. So this advisory council is getting up and running. I was just appointed, very proud to be appointed by the Senate President as the Senate's representative to that body. That body is going to be getting to work very soon. I bet we'll have a number of people in this room serving on that council. And the council's main task is to advise the Secretary and HLC in implementation of a seasonal communities designation. So here's how a seasonal communities designation will work. First of all, the town of Nantucket and the 6 towns in Martha's Vineyard automatically receive the designation, as do all towns in Barnstable County that have 35%, or at least 35% of the housing units are second homes, right? So this is all the lower and outer Cape. But there's going to be a regulatory process and a process for essentially all other towns on Cape Cod to come in and to receive that designation. So essentially this is envisioned to be something that all of our towns here on Cape Cod are going to benefit from. Also, communities in the Berkshires, right? The Berkshires, especially the southern Berkshires, places like Lenox, have some very similar housing challenges as we do. So I'm really confident that all Cape towns are going to receive this designation from HLC once they pursue a regulatory process. So once designated as a seasonal community, towns will have access and the ability to tap into certain programs and policies that have been thoughtfully designed to help both preserve and to develop and build year-round housing, right? The focus is on year-round housing. The business that we're gonna have to get into, that places like Nantucket and on the Vineyard and the Outer Cape are already getting into, right? Is not just thinking about, all right, affordable housing meaning subsidized housing for people who make below area median income. But the task ahead of us and before us in the coming years is essentially we're gonna have to subsidize housing for all year-round working people who don't yet own a home or aren't gonna inherit a home, right? Because that's the reality here, right? In Truro, for the median home price, right? Household has to make $400,000 a year. It's quite a bit of money. I don't make that kind of money, right? This is the task ahead of us. And so seasonal communities is essentially designed for us to subsidize the year-round housing that we need to sustain ourselves as year-round communities in the coming decades. So once you have that designation, here's what you can do. First, you can establish a year-round housing trust fund without going through the home rule process. So this is really essential, right? You need a mechanism at the municipal level to provide subsidy for housing, for year-round housing, for housing that's attainable, right? That's above affordable housing. Nantucket already has one of these on the books. Provincetown already has one of them on the books. Orleans, Chatham, has a home rule, and Orleans is a home rule. Both of you have home rules pending to establish this. You've been waiting on the legislature to do it. Now, no more, right? There's gonna be a regulatory process. You can just adopt it at a vote of your select board, and you'll be able to have this trust, right? The trust is gonna be that mechanism where we can provide subsidy, yes, for the construction of new year-round housing, but also for programs like lease to local programs, right? Those that are trying to chip away or retain year-round rental housing stock in our communities. Seasonal communities also allows communities to acquire year-round housing occupancy deed restrictions to build a middle-income year-round housing market. So, Provincetown, Truro, Chatham, other communities have also gone through the home rule process to allow themselves to negotiate a payment to property owners in exchange for restricting a home for year-round occupancy. Now all seasonal communities are gonna be able to tap into this. This is really how, if you look at peer communities, right, that have struggled with housing, places like Aspen and Vail, Colorado, Truckee, California, outside of Lake Tahoe, how have they addressed and really taken a big leap forward in solving our housing crisis? They've done so with these year-round deed restrictions. They've used a transfer fee on luxury real estate transactions to fund basically the purchase of these deed restrictions to create a middle market year-round housing market. That's what now is going to be enabled to do because of seasonal communities. Seasonal communities are going to be able to acquire and develop housing units specifically intended for public employees. And communities are also going to be able to retain housing specifically intended to preserve our creative economy. So I've heard multiple requests from a number of communities, from Edgartown who needs housing for their sewer operators, to school superintendents wondering how they're going to come up with housing for their teachers. This is going to enable that. Without this in law, you couldn't do it. Seasonal communities are going to be required. We're going to ask seasonal communities to do some things. We're going to be required to adopt bylaws that encourage tiny home construction, and also that encourage the use of undersized lots or merge lots, as long as tiny homes, merger lots, undersized lots are all used for year-round housing. This year-round housing restriction is a common thread throughout this. Towns are also going to have the ability to look for additional revenue sources. Towns are going to be able to raise their residential property tax exemption for primary year-round residents. Currently that threshold's at 35%. If you're a seasonal community, you'll be able to go to 50%, right? So the idea being is our communities are having to, frankly, subsidize housing, or year-round housing, for most all year-round working people who don't own a home or don't inherit a home, right? You're gonna be able to go to your tax base and make sure that property taxes, are not pushing year-round residents out. You're also going to be required to conduct a biannual housing needs assessment to provide more accurate forecasting and planning for housing. And the Cape Cod Commission and the Martha's Vineyard Commission, in the case of my friends on Martha's Vineyard, are going to be able to provide assistance there. So this is a huge, huge step forward. This is essentially all of the policies that we have been working on, that we have been brainstorming and pulling together with municipal leaders, with housing advocates across this region. Essentially, this is everything but the transfer fee. And it was a profound disappointment that the local option transfer fee was not ultimately included in the Affordable Homes Act. I cannot thank Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, the administration, so many of my colleagues were proposing what is a common sense revenue technique, right? This is really about revenue, right? How are you gonna solve housing? Housing is really, really complicated. How are we gonna subsidize year-round housing, right? The transfer fee is how we pay for it. But I'm pretty optimistic that we're gonna be able to come back here to get this 12 of the 19 communities within the Cape and Islands District have already passed home rules here. So this is really only a matter of time and is a real revenue tool. So what's next? Towns and municipalities who are already in seasonal communities designation, and from a Cape perspective, that includes Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, Eastham, Orleans, Chatham, Harwich, Dennis, Brewster. Y'all are automatically in. You're going to wait on some guidance from HLC as they promulgate the regulations. The regs are due, by the way, by December 15th, 2024, which, if you're in the regulatory business, is quite speedy. And then there's going to be an outline process in those regs for other communities to come in, and I expect other communities here across the Cape will qualify. Stay tuned for the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities to be having a regulatory process, to have listening sessions. This Seasonal Communities Advisory Council will get up and running. I bet a number of you will be asked to serve on this, and you should raise your hand if you want to serve. And of course, this office is going to be crafting technical assistance, providing technical assistance to our communities is coming. And then again, we're going to be continuing to fight for a local option for a real estate transfer fee in the upcoming legislative session. For the communities who have not yet passed home rules, you should do this. When you talk about where are we going to come up with money to solve the big problems, we figured out wastewater financing. How do we do it, right? We did it with looking to our room occupancy tax. How are we going to solve the housing crisis here? How are we going to pay for year-round housing? It's going to be through tapping into that transfer fee. So we really need all of y'all to be pushing for this and moving this forward. If you don't, the only solution is going to be going back to the voters at town meeting to raise their property taxes and to fund this, right? Which all of you know, who are in the business of town meeting work, how difficult that is. So we have such momentum here. We could not have better partnership from the governor and the lieutenant governor, who have squarely put housing as the #1 issue in Massachusetts, as the #1 impediment to our competitiveness. We've got to keep this up. We need to reject opposition to housing and call out this opposition for what it is, right? This is a threat to our year-round economy. This is a threat to our family businesses. This effectively is wealth preservation, this I've got mine, and no one else can have a piece of this place perspective. We've got to leave it behind. We've got to reject it. Our communities are doing that. And we really need to meet this moment. We cannot continue to put up barriers that are going to harm the next generation, they're going to harm our environment, and they're going to harm the continuity of our way of life. I am so encouraged by what we have been able to do as Cape Codders and the Islanders. A big shout out to the Islanders in the room who've helped make this happen, who've been as instrumental partners as anyone else. We really owe it to ourselves to keep up the momentum, to not step back from these ideas, to move forward aggressively with these new tools that your legislative delegation has been able to provide. So I just thank you for being here, for giving up a Wednesday afternoon. Christy, at least it's not a beach day, so the weather worked out great. But really, this is so crucial and important. Please stay tuned, please learn more about these opportunities, and we have a new legislative session that starts in January. I'm hoping I will have the opportunity to be your state senator for a 5th term, and I want to hear, and I know my colleagues want to hear, your other ideas, the other pieces in housing. What are the other policies and tools that you need to make a difference here on housing? We are all ears on this. This is our